Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. I'm Dr. Adrian Cable, Vice President of Research and Development at Lifesize, and you're watching episode 4 of my series on advancing collaboration. Now, what is that? Well, it's all about how we go beyond just video and voice and bring in whiteboarding, different kinds of content, improve productivity wherever you choose to collaborate into your meetings, just to make your work life more productive, more efficient, and maybe even more enjoyable. And this week, we're continuing our narrative arc on hybrid work. Hybrid work is it's the new normal. It's where we have a mixed environment of people working from home, working in their offices, working from wherever they want to work to be most productive, and how you integrate all those workflows together in the best possible way. And today we're going to get creative. And actually, we're going to talk about how to get creative when getting creative, if that makes sense, when you can't get together in person. So let's start with before the pandemic hit, back to the typical workday, if we can remember that far back. And the typical workday actually superficially had a lot of downtime. Water cooler chats, overhearing conversations. It wasn't wall-to-wall work from 8 till 5, 8 till 6. We took lunch breaks. We took coffee breaks. We overheard other people talking about interesting things that sparked our own creative juices. We'd go over. We'd start conversations that we never imagined we'd get into on topics that weren't what we're involved in on a day-to-day basis. There's a lot of downtime, right? And maybe downtime isn't quite the right word, because those moments of serendipity between real work is when creativity happens. And that is what steers organizations in interesting new directions. And we call this spontaneous creative combustion, which is a phrase that I really like. But since the pandemic, this has really changed in two important ways. So the first is that work from home basically means there's no serendipity, there's no overhearing. Everything has to be organized, everything has to be scheduled. If you don't have a calendared meeting where you interact with other people, you just spend the whole day staring at your computer, and that's not great for creativity. The second is that when you're working from home, you really have no downtime. Now, as we've already explored in previous weeks, without a lot of care and without using the right tools, work from home is generally a lot less efficient than working face-to-face in an office. People tend to spend longer work days getting the same amount done, but at the same time, there are often fewer distractions at home as well, unless you have kids, and we'll talk about that in a later episode in this series. But longer days and fewer distractions actually translates to exactly the wrong environment for creativity, which generally comes about when people are relaxed. And the one thing that I think we've learned from the pandemic is that the changes in our lives are not relaxing. For example, in Silicon Valley, where I live, the average number of PTO days taken by technology workers in 2020 fell by 50% compared with 2019. People are just no longer structuring breaks, downtime, opportunities to relax and recharge into their workspace, into their psychological workspace. And so we are heading for a big problem. We're basically seeing the complete decline of creativity, innovation, all of that kind of thing that normally just happens in the background in organizations. And the impact is kind of subtle, because a lack of creativity doesn't immediately impact business. The products that companies are selling will continue to sell. But creativity has a massive impact on long-term growth, long-term future potential in organizations, and workplace happiness. And so this is a problem that we really, really want to solve sooner rather than later. But it's worth saying that we haven't really seen the full effects of this yet. So what do you do? How do you re-navigate a work environment where you have to schedule creativity, right? Sounds a bit of an anachronism, actually. In work from home, hybrid work, people don't meet organically. So you have to be more deliberate about structuring creativity in a way that works. But for anybody who's actually tried to schedule a video brainstorm, it's super ineffective. It's very hard to schedule creativity. Creativity comes from unscheduled moments in life. And so people tend to feel awkward, they get anxious, they get stressed, they feel put on the spot to come up with ideas. It's a classic environment to kill creativity, and it becomes self-defeating. So making it work begins with getting people in the right mindset even before the meeting starts. And here's the solution: donuts. We'll get back to that in a minute. But first, everyone has their own way of finding a creative space. For some people, it's taking some exercise, carving out a little bit of time in their day to go for a walk or run or hike. And for other people like me, it's all about taking a long bath. And studies have shown that, contrary to the kind of common image that certainly we used to see before the pandemic of work from home as being lazy, hybrid work since the pandemic, it's meant longer hours with less but no more relaxation during the day. And I think you can kind of start with an exercise that you can do on your own here. Think about days before the pandemic, how much time you didn't spend at your desk, time that you spent getting a cup of coffee, going down to the cafeteria to get lunch, going for a little walk outside the office building, even just random contact with people in an elevator. All of that is gone. And compare that with your days now. And I think most of you will admit that it's very, very hard not to spend all your day staring in front of a computer screen. So here's if you're organizing a more creative environment for your team, trying to do that, here's a homework assignment that you can set for everyone in your team. Weeks before you want to even think about scheduling brainstorming sessions where people get together to think creatively together. Everyone should be able to identify their own creative relaxation outlet and carve out an hour every day during the workday to do it. It can be a run, can be anything, yoga, a bath. It doesn't need to be the same time each day. But the important thing is it has to be on your calendar, so meetings don't get scheduled over it. And that is critical, because otherwise, if you just promise yourself that you're going to do this, it's not going to happen. Trust me, we've been there. And you'll find that with this part of everyone's workday, you're helping to make sure that the seeds of creativity have time to grow. And this hour off during each day has to become as much a habit as your weekly review meetings, stand-ups, and other things that are on your calendar. And then when the time comes when people are beginning to get into the right mindset and you want to bring everyone together in a video brainstorm, the key is making sure that people start off in a relaxed, even silly mindset, very different from typical work mode. And so the more distinct from day-to-day work an atmosphere you can create for your team for these kind of meetings, the more you'll find the creativity will flow. And I'm absolutely not talking about doing the kind of team building games you see sometimes scheduled for offsites, that kind of thing. A lot of people find those off-putting, and they increase rather than reduce anxiety. But I am talking about things that make these kind of creative experiences that you're trying to schedule with your team feel distinct from a normal work meeting, and even create a conversation starter that has nothing to do with work at all. And here's an idea that we've done that works really, really well. Find a local donut shop that has interesting flavors, something a little different. Get on Uber Eats and get the donuts delivered to each of your remote team members just before the meeting starts. So it's not only a great tool to get somebody out of a work headspace, which isn't productive for creativity, but it also means the meeting begins with a shared activity. And in the office, a shared activity might be having a cup of coffee. We don't really have that together anymore. Nobody meets on Zoom to drink coffee together. But by sending people donuts just before a meeting begins, you've started the session in a very, very different kind of headspace than where you'd normally begin in a work video conference. And research has shown that engaging in collaborative activities of any kind, whether it's playing sports or eating donuts, reduces anxiety and boosts creative energy, which are both great things that you need for a successful video brainstorm. So the second thing to consider is what tools you want to use to make this brainstorm successful and productive. Do we just stick with Zoom or with Lifesize or Teams, or are there other tools that we can add to the mix to make the experience more enjoyable? And here, we actually want to continue with the fun theme and with tools that basically keep people in an explorative mindset. There's one tool that we love, which isn't actually widely known. It's called Gather, and it tries to simulate the meeting structure of a real physical office and gamify interactions. Now, I should say that we have no affiliation at all with this tool. It's just something that I personally love, and it's really great for creative meetings. Unlike most of these creative tools, they're much better to show than to talk about. So here we go. This is what Gather looks. It looks a bit like a kind of 80s video adventure game, right? You're a character, you move around a space. And the fascinating thing about this is that, so first of all, you can design spaces completely yourself before the meeting. You can make it look like an office, you can make it look like something completely different. And the idea of Gather is that everybody who's part of this space appears as an avatar that can move around, and you can see all the other avatars moving around as you do. And when you're close to somebody, their video pops up on your screen, your video pops up on their screen, and you can talk and interact. And at the same time, you can also share screens or apps, just like you would with a video tool, except that rather than having the concept of virtual meeting rooms, you have a real space and you can go up to people and talk. So you can walk up to somebody one-to-one to have a one-to-one conversation. You can go to like a table, for example, here, in which case you can only have a conversation with other people sitting at the table. Or there's a broadcast area as well, where when you're in, you can speak to anyone else in the space. And again, these spaces are completely configurable with apps, with games, and you can set them up to make them feel like a kind of creative space that allows people to break out, have their own discussions, share their own things, mix private conversations with shared activities, very much like you can do in a real physical space. And we find that this tool works very, very well indeed. So have a look at that. Next, of course, we mentioned Captivo briefly in last week's talk. Captivo is a life-size tool. You can find it on Google, Kaptivo. And Captivo basically brings the dry erase whiteboard into the remote virtual video work context. So the dry erase whiteboard is a phenomenal tool for brainstorming and collaboration. It's something that's a kind of unsung hero of every physical meeting space. Pretty much any office has a dry erase whiteboard because it's just a phenomenal tool for people working together and brainstorming. And of course, the problem with the dry erase whiteboard is it doesn't work remotely. There's no long arm coming out of a conference system writing on your whiteboard remotely. And so Captivo is a tool. It's basically a camera system that attaches to any dry erase whiteboard, and it allows you to share the content of your whiteboard remotely. And this is an amazing tool. I'm just going to show very briefly what it can do. For more details, you can see last week's talk. This is a real physical whiteboard that's in my office. You write on the whiteboard. Everything is shared real time with anyone watching. And in addition to simply sharing a picture of the whiteboard, we can do some amazing things as well. So we can convert the writing to text, for example. We can translate the writing to a different language. So if, for example, you're doing a meeting where you have people from different countries, or you're running some kind of e-learning activity, people can all see what you're doing in their own language, and that is all real time. And works seamlessly with any video tool, whether it's Lifesize, Zoom, Teams, any video tool you're using. Captivo can add whiteboarding to that experience, which is a great tool for creativity. So finally, before we wrap, I'd like to share, as I always do, a few anecdotes. This time, what happens when creativity in the workplace goes wrong. And we've all seen some great examples of that. Here are a few of my favorites. This is a phenomenal bathroom, which is maybe not quite right for privacy. And while we're on the bathroom theme as well, this is a lecture theatre in a school. Well, obviously, if you want to take a break, there's a toilet right in front of everyone with a toilet paper that's just a little bit out of reach. If you like cooking, don't use Black and Gold's products because the canola cooking spray and the fly and insect killer look very, very similar. Definitely a design fail there. And here's another design fail. Eat kids free. Not a great marketing pitch there. And that leads on to next week's topic, which is how you work from home effectively when you have distractions in your environment, like kids. And that's it for this week. I'm Dr. Adrian Cable, and I'll see you next week. Thank you very much.